There is a strange phenomenon in human psychology. You can meet hundreds of people throughout your life, exchange thousands of words, share countless ordinary experiences, and yet only a handful remain in your mind with remarkable intensity. Years can pass, circumstances can change, you may no longer speak to them, see them, or even recognize the person you were when you knew them. And still, something about them remains. Why? It is tempting to believe that unforgettable people possess some extraordinary quality that ordinary people lack. Perhaps they are more attractive, more intelligent, more charismatic, or more successful, but that explanation is too simple. The people who become impossible to forget often do something much more powerful. They create an emotional experience. The human mind does not preserve every event equally. It filters, it discards the ordinary, and gives special attention to experiences that carry emotional weight. Think about your own life. You probably cannot remember what you ate on a random Tuesday several years ago. But you can remember the exact feeling of a conversation that changed the way you saw yourself. You can remember the person who challenged you when everyone else agreed with you. You can remember someone whose presence made you feel unusually confident, alive, understood, threatened, or curious. This is where the psychology of being unforgettable begins. People remember how you made them feel because emotion gives an experience significance. Facts can be stored, but emotional experiences become connected to identity. When someone causes you to experience a powerful emotion, your mind does not simply record the interaction. It begins asking questions. Why did I feel that way? What did this person see in me? Why did their approval matter? Why did their rejection hurt? Why am I still thinking about this? And the moment the mind begins asking questions, the person has entered a deeper psychological space. This does not mean you should manipulate people or manufacture emotional chaos. In fact, trying too hard to appear unforgettable usually produces the opposite effect. People can sense desperation. They can sense when someone is performing charisma rather than possessing genuine presence. The deeper lesson is about impact. Imagine two people entering a room. One speaks constantly, tells everyone what he thinks, tries to impress everyone, and desperately seeks attention. The other speaks less but listens carefully. When he does speak, his words are precise. He notices details other people overlook. He does not rush to prove himself. He makes the person in front of him feel genuinely seen. Who do you think people remember? Usually, it is the second person. Why? Because attention is rare. Genuine attention has become almost a form of power. Most people are not truly listening when someone speaks. They are preparing their response, waiting for an opportunity to talk about themselves, or evaluating how they are being perceived. When you give someone your complete attention, you create an experience that feels unusual. You are essentially saying, without words, for this moment, you matter. That experience can stay with someone, but there is another layer. Unforgettable people often awaken something that already exists inside us. They may make us feel more intelligent than we believed we were. They may challenge an insecurity we have avoided confronting. They may reveal an ambition we buried. They may make us laugh when we had forgotten how to enjoy ourselves. This is why certain encounters feel strangely larger than the amount of time they occupied in our lives. A person might know you for 3 months and affect you more than someone you knew for 10 years. Duration is not the same thing as psychological depth. What matters is the intensity and meaning attached to the experience. This gives us an important principle. Do not focus on being remembered, focus on creating meaning. If you want people to remember you, stop asking, "How can I make an impression?" Instead ask, "What experience am I creating when I am around people?" Do people feel heard? Do they feel challenged? Do they feel energized? Do they feel that they can be more honest around you? Do your conversations leave them thinking differently? These questions lead to something much deeper than superficial charisma. Consider the difference between a person who constantly gives compliments and a person who occasionally says something that reveals genuine insight about you. The first may make you feel good for a few minutes. The second may make you think about their words for weeks. Why? Because recognition is powerful when it feels accurate. When someone notices a quality in you that others overlook, they touch something personal. They do not merely give you praise, they give you a new interpretation of yourself. And that is one of the most powerful ways a person becomes unforgettable. But emotional impact can also come from contrast. A person who is calm in a chaotic environment stands out. Someone who remains respectful when insulted creates curiosity. Someone who does not desperately seek approval can become more interesting because their behavior does not follow the expected script. Human beings are naturally drawn toward what they cannot immediately categorize. If you are completely predictable, the mind quickly becomes comfortable with you. And once something becomes completely familiar, attention decreases. But when someone possesses consistency without being predictable, when they have principles but also depth, confidence but humility, warmth but boundaries, they create psychological complexity. The mind wants to understand complexity. That is why presence matters more than performance. You do not need to dominate every conversation. You do not need to tell extraordinary stories. You do not need to become mysterious for the sake of appearing mysterious. You need to become someone whose internal world has enough substance that interacting with you creates a meaningful experience. Build knowledge, develop discipline, learn to listen, become comfortable with silence, study people without constantly judging them. Understand your own emotions so that you are not controlled by them. Develop convictions strong enough that you do not change your personality every time the room changes. Then something interesting happens. You stop trying to become unforgettable, and you become memorable as a consequence of becoming substantial. The deepest form of charisma is not demanding attention. It is creating an experience that makes attention feel worthwhile. So the next time you enter a room, do not ask yourself, how can I impress these people? Ask something far more powerful. What will people experience because I was here? Because people may forget your exact words. They may forget what you wore. They may even forget the circumstances of your meeting. But if you made them feel seen, challenged, awakened, understood, or transformed, a part of that experience can remain long after you have disappeared. And once you understand that unforgettable people create emotional experiences, you begin to notice another force at work, something quieter, but often even more powerful. They do not give you access to everything. They leave something unexplained. There is a reason certain people continue occupying your mind long after they have left your life. It is not always because they were perfect. Sometimes it is because the story never felt completely finished. There was a conversation you never had, a question you never answered, a side of them you never fully understood. The human mind dislikes unfinished stories. When something is complete, the mind can put it away. But when something remains unresolved, attention keeps returning to it. We replay conversations. We reinterpret small details. We wonder what someone meant. We imagine what might have happened if circumstances had been different. This is where mystery becomes psychologically powerful. Think about the difference between someone who tells you everything immediately and someone who reveals themselves gradually. The first person may be pleasant, but after a while there is little left to discover. The second creates a process of discovery, and discovery creates investment. This does not mean becoming deliberately secretive, playing emotional games, or withholding information to make people anxious. Those tactics may create temporary obsession, but they rarely create genuine respect. Real mystery comes from having depth that cannot be understood in a single encounter. There is always more to discover because there is actually more within you. A person with a rich inner life does not need to manufacture mystery. Their interests, principles, experiences, ambitions, contradictions, and perspectives naturally create layers. Consider someone who constantly explains themselves. Whenever they are criticized, they defend themselves. Whenever they make a decision, they immediately justify it. Whenever someone misunderstands them, they rush to correct the misunderstanding. What happens? The mystery disappears. Everything is immediately exposed. Now consider someone who is comfortable allowing others to misunderstand minor things about them. They know who they are, so they do not feel compelled to control every interpretation. That restraint can be powerful. There is a philosophical principle here. What you refuse to over-explain often reveals the strength of your internal foundation. If you constantly need other people to understand you, you have given them control over your emotional equilibrium. But when you become comfortable with being misunderstood, you develop independence, and independence changes how people perceive you. The person who does not desperately seek approval becomes psychologically different from the person who needs constant validation. Their attention is not scattered. Their energy is not consumed by managing other people's opinions. This is why distance can sometimes increase psychological presence. When someone is constantly available, constantly messaging, constantly explaining, and constantly trying to maintain connection, the mind eventually treats that person as part of the background. But when someone has their own life, their own goals, and their own priorities, their absence becomes noticeable. The important distinction is this: absence is powerful when it comes from purpose, not manipulation. Do not disappear simply to make someone chase you. Disappear into your work. Disappear into your development. Disappear into the discipline required to build a life that does not depend on being constantly noticed. There is a profound difference between withdrawing to create anxiety and withdrawing because you have somewhere meaningful to go. The first is a tactic, the second is character, and people often sense the difference. Another reason mystery creates unforgettable impressions is that it allows the other person to participate in constructing the story. When you reveal everything, you provide the conclusion yourself, but when there are unanswered questions, the other person's imagination becomes involved. They begin filling in the gaps. They think about you when you are not present. They replay moments. They interpret your silence. They wonder what you were thinking. And ironically, much of what they remember may be created inside their own mind. This is one of the strange powers of human perception. People do not experience you exactly as you are. They experience their interpretation of you. That means you cannot completely control how people remember you. But you can influence the quality of the experiences and impressions you leave behind. One of the most effective ways is through selective disclosure. Do not tell everyone your entire history. Do not reveal every ambition before you have built it. Do not announce every emotional reaction. Do not turn every conversation into a confession. There is strength in allowing people to discover you over time. Imagine meeting someone who tells you within the first conversation everything they have experienced, everything they fear, everything they want, everything they believe, and everything they plan to do. There may be emotional intimacy, but there is little curiosity. Now imagine meeting someone who is open but measured. They answer honestly, but they do not feel obligated to reveal everything. They listen as much as they speak. They allow silence to exist. They have opinions, but they do not need to broadcast them constantly. You leave the conversation thinking, there is more to this person. That thought is powerful, because curiosity is attention with direction. But there is another dimension to becoming unforgettable, unfinished emotional tension. Sometimes a person becomes memorable because they challenged you. They did not simply agree with everything you said. They introduced an idea that forced you to reconsider yourself. They questioned an assumption. They refused to flatter you. And this can be more memorable than approval. Why? Because genuine challenge creates internal movement. A compliment may make you feel good, but a meaningful challenge can make you think. And people remember those who make them think. This is why the most compelling individuals often possess a combination of warmth and boundaries. They can connect with people, but they do not dissolve themselves into other people's expectations. They can be generous without becoming desperate. They can be emotionally present without becoming emotionally dependent. They give you something real while still maintaining a world of their own. That balance creates intrigue. You begin to realize that becoming unforgettable has less to do with controlling other people's attention and more to do with refusing to abandon your own center. The person who has no life beyond the relationship becomes predictable. The person who has a mission, principles, interests, and personal standards remains psychologically alive. Their attention becomes valuable because it is not unlimited. Their presence matters because their life continues whether you are watching or not. And perhaps this is the deepest lesson. You should never build mystery around emptiness. If there is nothing underneath the silence, eventually people discover it. Build substance first. Read more, think more deeply, develop skills, pursue difficult goals, learn to sit alone without becoming restless. Become comfortable with your own company. Stop narrating every move you make to the world. Let your actions reveal what your words do not need to explain. Then your silence has meaning, your absence has meaning, your presence has meaning, and when you finally understand this, you stop trying to make people wonder about you. You give them something worth wondering about, because the most unforgettable person is not the one who plays the hardest game of disappearing. It is the person whose life contains enough depth that even after they leave the room, the questions remain, and this brings us to the deepest layer of why certain people become impossible to forget. It is not always about their personality. It is not always about their appearance, their intelligence, their confidence, or even the experiences you shared with them. Sometimes what makes a person unforgettable is what they came to represent. They became connected to something inside you. Perhaps they represented freedom when you felt trapped. Perhaps they represented confidence when you doubted yourself. Perhaps they represented possibility at a time when your life felt predictable. Perhaps they saw something in you that you had never recognized in yourself. And this is where human psychology becomes particularly interesting. We often believe we are attached to people, when in reality we are attached to the meaning we have assigned to them. A person can become a symbol. They can become the symbol of a version of yourself that you wanted to become. They can represent an opportunity you lost, a future you imagined, a feeling you rarely experience, or a part of your personality that you had suppressed. That is why someone can leave your life and still remain psychologically present. You are not necessarily remembering the person. You are remembering what you became or imagined you could become when you were around them. Think about the person who made you feel unusually confident. Maybe you were uncertain about your abilities, but their belief in you caused you to see yourself differently. Years later, you may still remember them. Why? Because they were not simply another person in your history. They became connected to your identity. This is one of the most powerful forms of influence, when someone becomes associated with a transformation in how you perceive yourself. And there is an important lesson here for anyone who wants to leave a lasting impression. If you want to become memorable, do not focus exclusively on making people admire you. Help them encounter a better version of themselves. There is tremendous psychological power in making someone feel that they are capable of more. But this must be genuine. Do not flatter people simply to make them dependent on your approval. Do not manufacture compliments. Instead, pay attention. Observe qualities they may not recognize in themselves. Encourage their potential when you genuinely see it. Sometimes one accurate observation can remain with a person for years. Imagine someone telling you you have more discipline than you realize. Maybe you had never thought of yourself that way. That single sentence may change how you interpret your own behavior. The person who said it may eventually disappear from your life, but the idea remains. You begin noticing your discipline, you begin testing yourself, you begin acting differently, and suddenly the person who gave you that insight becomes part of your personal story. This is the highest level of psychological impact. You continue changing because of an interaction that has already ended. But there is a darker side to this phenomenon. Sometimes people become unforgettable because they activate an unresolved wound. A person may make you feel rejected, insignificant, abandoned, or inadequate. Because the emotional experience is painful and unresolved, your mind keeps returning to it. You replay what happened, you wonder what you could have said differently, you imagine another outcome. You ask why they treated you that way, and without realizing it, you give the person continued psychological power long after they have physically left your life. This is why being unforgettable is not automatically a sign of positive influence. Some people remain in our minds because they inspired us. Others remain because they wounded us. The difference is what we do with the memory. If you allow the memory to become an identity, you remain trapped inside the experience. But if you extract the lesson, you transform the experience into wisdom. This is where emotional independence begins. You cannot control who leaves an impression on you, but you can decide what that impression means. A rejection does not have to mean that you are unworthy. A betrayal does not have to mean that everyone is untrustworthy. A lost relationship does not have to mean that your best days are behind you. The mature mind asks a different question, not, why did this person do this to me, but, what did this experience reveal about me? That question moves you from victimhood toward agency. And this principle applies to the way you influence others as well. The people who leave the deepest positive impressions are often those who create psychological permission. They make you feel permitted to think bigger, speak honestly, pursue something difficult, or become less afraid of judgment. They do not necessarily give you answers. They make you ask better questions. That is far more powerful. Because answers can become outdated, questions continue working inside the mind. Consider the mentor who tells you, "What would you attempt if you knew you could not fail?" Maybe you hear it once, but suddenly your mind begins exploring possibilities. You start examining the limits you placed on yourself. The mentor is no longer present, but the question remains. This is how influence becomes independent of physical presence. And perhaps that is the ultimate form of being unforgettable. You leave behind something that continues operating after you are gone. A thought, a principle, a new perspective, a feeling of possibility, a challenge, a standard, a memory that makes someone behave differently. This also changes the way you should think about your own relationships. Instead of constantly asking, "Do they remember me?" ask, "What did I awaken in them?" Did you make them more courageous? Did you make them think more deeply? Did you help them recognize their own value? Did you challenge them to become more disciplined? Did you give them an experience that expanded their understanding of themselves? These are much more meaningful questions than whether someone misses you. Because being missed is temporary. Being transformative is different. Someone can miss your presence and eventually move on. But if you helped change the way they see themselves, some part of your influence may remain for decades. And there is another important lesson here for your own emotional freedom. You must learn to separate the person from the symbol. Sometimes you are not longing for the individual. You are longing for who you were when you were with them. You miss the confidence you felt. You miss the excitement. You miss the possibility. You miss the version of yourself that seemed alive in their presence. Once you recognize this, something changes. You realize that what you associated with that person may actually be something you can develop within yourself. If they represented confidence, build confidence. If they represented adventure, create adventure. If they represented intellectual depth, study. If they represented freedom, restructure your life. Stop worshipping the person who awakened something in you. Build the quality they awakened. That is how you reclaim your psychological power. The goal is not to erase memories. The goal is to understand them, because your memories contain information about your deepest desires. Pay attention to the people you cannot forget. Ask yourself what they represented. What did they awaken? What did they expose? What did they make you believe about yourself? And perhaps most importantly, what part of that experience can you now create without them? When you answer that question honestly, you stop chasing ghosts from your past. You begin building the qualities you once admired in others. And then something remarkable happens. You become the person who carries that quality into other people's lives. You become someone whose presence does not merely entertain or impress. It transforms, and that is the deepest form of being unforgettable.